From the 305 to the 303, this is TCSP. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Brian and the Casually Serious Band.
Welcome to the Casually Serious Podcast. Today, Bob and KenMan speak about their favorite 1980s sitcom. Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Casually Serious Podcast. I am Bob Riley.
I'm KenMan.
He is. That's KenMan. Today's episode, sorry about that slow intro. Today's episode.
Ubu.
Ubu. What is up, Ubu? We're talking about 80s sitcoms today. KenMan, how the hell you doing, man? How's your week so far?
I've had a great week from Monday to now Taco Tuesday. It's a beautiful, beautiful day today. Happy, feeling great, excited to talk about 80s sitcoms. How about you over there on that yellow couch, man?
I'm chilling here. Peg's out getting her nails done. Hopefully those gargoyle feet too. Oof. Yeah, I'm hanging out, man. I imagine you have some pretty decent weather out there in the 0305er, right?
It's getting warm, man. It's starting to get warm. I've been talking a lot of crap the past few weeks since we started this show about how beautiful it's been down here, and it has, but it's getting warm. It's coming.
Well, in contrast, in comparison, it's going to snow tonight in Denver.
That's insane.
That's just the way it goes.
The 13th of April.
Yeah, and it was warm, really nice and warm today. So, again, that's just one of the crazy things of living in Denver, Colorado. I love it to death. I can't imagine living anywhere else. But
do you think we talk about weather in the beginning of our show to like let people know that I'm in Miami and you're in Denver? Or is it more just we like to talk weather? Because like normally if like I just call you to talk to you, we're probably not going to talk about weather. I'm just saying.
No, we could easily just go onto Google or ask our phone what the weather is like if we want to know, even for another city. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know why we are compelled to do such. Maybe it's because we're old and how's the weather is one of those fucking things that has always worked. It's something that we can go to. And like you say, it's something you and I never talk about. So that's why we can ease into a show with it.
There you go. Feels comfortable.
Nice
Feels good.
It does feel comfortable, as does 80s sitcoms, man. They I don't know, man. There's something special about them, and they get burnt into our head because they were played so many times. Most of them went to syndication over and over. They were played throughout the 90s when new sitcoms were being made. But there's a whole lot of them, massive amount of them. Mm-hmm. And if we are to stay within any sort of time constraint that is intelligent, that will keep our viewers engaged for a long period of time, going into 30 or 40 of them out of the 9,700 that were made is not going to be good. So we're going to follow the same format we usually follow, which is 5 of my favorite, 5 of Ken's favorites. We'll talk about them and see what you guys have to say about it. We're going to start off with Ken's number 5, but we're going to see who's hanging out with us today. Todd Morris, what's going on, man? Todd Morris says that he loves when we talk about weather, dude. That's what I'm talking about. Thank you so much.
That's what we need, a little feedback.
Yes, exactly. Todd's an old friend, obviously, from the 305. And, I guess it's just one of those icebreakers. But you're bound to find someone talking about the weather on one of these shows that we're about to talk about. But, Ken, was there anything you wanted to talk about real quick before we get into this, man? Was there any crazy stuff that you found out as you were doing any sort of research when you had to go back and check out some of the info on these shows?
I mean, a bunch of these, born in 74, 80 shows. I'm 6 to 16, essentially. I mean, that's the age you're watching TV. So there's a ton of them, and everything I look back at, I was like, oh yeah, I saw that. I watched that. I saw that. I watched that. So narrowing it down to the ones that I saw pretty much every episode, never missed. And then from there, trying to pick a top 5 was really difficult for this decade. 70s wasn't as difficult to do this. This was a lot harder. There's going to be a lot that are going to be left out. So definitely I'd love to have you guys chime in and just throw some out there. as we get towards, because you're probably going to say some that we're going to get there towards. But, if you think of any obscure ones that you liked in the 80s, let's go through some of that too. But this was a very difficult topic, and one that, we could go on for hours on.
I think,
don't worry about it. Stick around.
I think a lot of the folks, Gary Marshall, the big hitters from the 70s, took their craft, honed it, and just absolutely exploded in the 80s. And not only that, what they did in the 70s put templates down for folks to come in and do it in the 80s. That's, I think, the reason why there was such a massive list of 80s shows that we had, that we kind of were like, all right, which ones are we going to talk about? And, you picked your 5 that you love. And I was like, shit, 3 of those are my favorite. And so I didn't want to kind of copy any of those. And you know how we do that. We don't want to copy each other.
That's why I went first. I sent you my 5 first. I'm like, these are
very good. Very good. That was the 5 that I have chosen are not my 5. They are. There's just what that means is there were so many that it's so easy for us to pick an alternate 5 if we had to. I kind of did. But having said all that,
that also played off of the success of the sitcoms in the 70s. So you started to get so much more interest, and then that kind of opened up a whole bunch of just different topics and ideas. And now you've got new writers and new thoughts and new ideas flowing. Some stuck, some didn't, but they were throwing everything at people at this point. And every kind of show that could be written was written in the 80s.
That's the truth. And they had to, either they had to, or they just became memorable because of the theme songs, which was a huge thing. So we're going to get right into it. This is Ken's number 5. Our music trademark department is going to get smacked with that one, but that's all right, man.
That one went for a while. This song, first of all, this is what got me into the show. This show was on NBC's must-watch TV Thursday nights, where that lineup was The Cosby Show, Family Ties, Cheers, and Night Court. So, you're watching all these shows, obviously. Cheers ends, and that funky bass line kicks in. That song got me first. That was the first reason I started watching Night Court. But it definitely wasn't the only reason I watched Night Court. This is a great show. It was hilarious. I mean, it was based on just a night court setup in Manhattan that just dealt with low-end kind of criminals. So it was just funny characters that would continue to come in through the night. The judge was just a very young, opposite of being a standard conservative judge. He was an amateur magician, which actually he was in real life as well, Harry Anderson, and Judge Harry Stone was who he played on the show. Absolutely hilarious. Great cast of characters. John Larroquette was fantastic as the defending attorney, and he would be there constantly just hitting on anything that walked. Always was just obsessed with sex and money, and the rest of the characters played in to just all the different groups of criminals and possible criminals that would be coming through night in and night out on the show. To me, it was just an endless ability just to kind of write more and more of these things, because you can come up with all types of silly stories. Michael Richards Kramer came in on one show before he was on Seinfeld. He was hilarious. There was a lot of cameos in these shows with different people coming in and out and maybe not really speaking too much of what they were really there for, but they would just kind of be sitting in the background. This show was always funny. It was always fresh. And the group together did so much. I mean, Marky Post was the prosecuting attorney, and she was always there just doing her thing. She was Harry Stone's love affair. So you kind of had that. They never quite got together, but it was just one of those things. So you had the kind of love thing going on, the triangle almost, because Larroquette always pushed himself into the middle of that. Bull, the bailiff, was just hilarious and had just mostly one-liners, and they were great. The curse of this show was always the bailiff. The first bailiff, and I forget their names, but the old lady that was the first bailiff died after the first season. Real life died. Second bailiff came in, died after the second season. 2 bailiffs dead until they finally got a little bit younger with their last one that went from the last 4 seasons. that was just a kind of weird little tidbit I looked back on the show and thought was a little bit strange. But the show itself, I think the time slot helped it a lot. It brought a lot of people in to kind of introduce it, but it definitely didn't do anything to hurt itself with the content of the show. It was very funny.
Yeah, I don't remember watching it a lot. I know that it was on in my house because, like you said, there was a specific time slot that I fell into. So I don't know. Maybe I was eating and then Family Ties came on, or Family Ties came on and then I ate. I don't really know. But I know I didn't watch this show a lot. However, I remember the characters. I remember Bull, obviously. And there's so much. All the TV shows that we watched in the 80s are just one tiny piece of a very large puzzle that just basically is made up of us getting plopped down in front of a TV during dinner, whatever, to shut us up. And these were the kinds of things. Obviously, we're getting older at this time. Like you said, we're talking 8, 9, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and throughout the early teens, which is very formative years for us. But I don't recall the show a whole hell of a lot. Although I remember, like you said, I remember the characters, and every once in a while I say something odd like, "She's no Marky Post." To someone, they'll be like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" So that's really the only connection I have to the show is being able to name drop her and have really nobody know what I'm talking about.
Oh, well, I mean, the show was nominated for 31 Emmys. It won 7. So, I mean, it for a show that was slotted a little bit later and never really had that earlier time slot, it was always at the end of this kind of lineup. But just to be a part of that lineup obviously helped it quite a bit. But it was a great show. Ran until 1992, from 84 to 92. So to have that kind of runtime was pretty impressive for really any of the shows at that time. So it had some staying power, and watching them back, actually, I thought they were still pretty funny.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's kind of crazy, but the show that I have number 5 on my list also ran from 1984 to 1982. So let's take a look at this one. You guys might, 92. You might recall this one.
Maybe.
Yeah, man, that was a show that I don't know. It had to make the list. Obviously, we all know about Bill and his pudding pop situations, and we know that there's a lot of bad attached to him in real life. But there's nothing that anyone can really do to take away from what he gave this character, his character that he created for the show. Obviously, the Cosby Show. There's no taking away from that. There's plenty taking away from his character in real life. But in terms of what he did for my youth, and even though he might have been lying about the messages he got across, they were very important messages. And Bill Cosby's always been very pro-black and trying to make sure that he gets a lot of pro-black statements across in intelligent ways. And he had the power to do so. America loved Bill Cosby. So I'm going to dive into just some a quick synopsis that I dug up from the interwebs. Obviously, we have Cliff Huxtable, Claire, Theo, Vanessa, Denise, and Rudy. And The Cosby Show is an American television sitcom co-created by and starring Bill Cosby, which aired Thursday nights between September 20th, 84 and April 30th, 92, focusing on an upper middle class African-American family living in Brooklyn, New York. The Cosby Show spent 5 consecutive seasons as the number 1 rated show on television. And The Cosby Show and All the Family are the only sitcoms in the history of the Nielsen ratings to be the number 1 show for 5 seasons. It spent all 8 of its seasons in the top 20. The biggest hit of the 1980s and almost single-handedly revived the sitcom genre and NBC's rating fortunes. Cliff Huxtable was named the greatest television dad. Now, that's huge, obviously. And knowing that what we just said and what we know about Bill Cosby now, it's even crazier to think of how beautiful and wonderful he made that character, and how much of a father he was to a lot of us. I know my wife and women and men growing up at that time thought of him as a father figure and knew that he wasn't bullshitting. It was pretty funny when he did it. And Lisa Bonet. Yeah, there was always a good reason for me to like some of the sitcoms that I like, and I liked watching Lisa Bonet a lot. But yeah, I think
she's a good actress.
Yeah, she's a great actress. I loved her in High Fidelity, but the group as a whole was definitely funny. One of the I guess the episodes that I can pull out of my memory banks was when Stevie Wonder was on there, and Theo decides to throw the old "jam it on the one" thing when he says Stevie Wonder says, "Give me something that a rapper would say, jam it on the one," and then it just becomes jam it on the one. So there was just a weird thing, and then I think sometime later on, Rudy might have saying, "I just called to say I love you" with Stevie Wonder. I don't know, but I remember that episode for some reason more than anything, and that was definitely a good show, man. It was one; it had to be on the list regardless of Mr. Cos, man.
Yeah, this one was like just barely off mine. There were actually two that were there were five, there were like 20, but this was one. And absolutely, I'm glad you were able to include the Cosby Show. I don't think I missed an episode of the Cosby Show. I've watched every episode. That was a show that was definitely on that Thursday night must-see. So I was right there with it and didn't miss a show. Definitely, it was it was the 80s version again in its own kind of way of All in the Family. And it was just taking a different type of family and a different type of American family and trying to show what now we're dealing with from in the 80s, and especially with that era in between that we call the 70s. I mean, there's so much to talk about in the 60s and there's so much to talk about in the 80s. That transition period had a lot to say in its own right, but I think that's why you got these kind of shows in the 80s. And the Cosby Show was just written incredibly. It dealt with everything and a lot of things that, again, people weren't maybe ready for, on these kind of TV shows.
A lot of these shows did that, man. It's almost impossible to pick, at least on the 10 that we picked out. It's almost impossible to pick one of those that didn't hit on something, because that was really all you could do as a sitcom. The only way to shock somebody that's used to laughing is to drop some truth shit in their lap.
It's true.
Nobody wants to hear about, like a kidnapping or something like that. Like, oh my God, why I thought we were talking about, Larry liking cake, for like 3 episodes, and all of a sudden you're telling me about kidnapping. But it was a smart formula back then, because it definitely gave you the ability to know that it was a family that was dealing with a bunch of different things that all families deal with, even though there weren't a lot of families, I don't think, like the Huxtables.
Mm-hmm. I don't think your dogs really like Bill Cosby.
Yeah, she's a Schnauzer and a poodle, so I don't know. She really likes Shirley Feeney, but hated Hogan's Heroes. So
it's sad that we can't talk about the show and Bill Cosby in a more affectionate manner as to what we knew him as and what he really is, I guess. But yeah, that separation of what he did and that what was put before was definitely something. All right, man, we're done with Cosby then. Forget it. The dogs say it's over.
They're losing. I don't know.
Number 4. The facts of life.
Ooh-wee.
In a world it never seems. Anyway, I sing the song around the house almost on the daily. I mean, I don't know why. I do know why. Because I have a 7-year-old and it's like, she'll like, why? That's the facts of life. And what? You take the good, you take the bad, you take them both, and there you have the facts of life. It's philosophy within a theme song.
It's a pretty simple list, very simple theory.
So this was a show I loved watching, and this is where I definitely fell in love with blondes. Blair was just like, oh my God. That was a great reason to watch the show for me. But beyond that, the show itself was actually quite interesting. This was a spinoff from Different Strokes, where which we'll talk about possibly later if it makes our top 10. But Different Strokes, of course, had one of their housekeepers who was handling a girls' school situation within Different Strokes, and that kind of became the spinoff, as Mrs. Garrett was in charge of these girls within this girls' school, private girls' school. It kind of messed up pretty bad in the first season because they had about 8 different girls, including Molly Ringwald. She was actually cast in this originally, and then they brought it down to just the 4 girls, and they kind of made a whole little story about these girls were having some issues with other girls, so they were going to live privately over here, and blah. That's how they did this. So it worked out, and the show was great. The chemistry was great with the four girls. Being a young boy, I was loving watching these girls go through what they were going through on these shows day in and day out. They were hilarious. Mrs. Garrett was hilarious. It was just one of these shows that, it stayed fresh again because it was always bringing you up to date with new things that were going on, real life situations, some of which at my age I knew nothing of. So of course the show is dealing with college girls, and after a little while they're going to graduate. So they did. So after a few seasons, they had to change the show again. And Mrs. Garrett was always into cooking and gourmet stuff. So now they got a gourmet store. And the girls come back after graduation to live in the renovated house to have little rooms for them to all of a sudden work in this store with Mrs. Garrett selling gourmet foods. And that went on for a few seasons that way. We saw George Clooney. We saw Cloris Leachman. Both of them came in the end of the seasons, last two seasons, of the show. So there was a lot of kind of in and out and plug and play with Facts of Life, but it always maintained extremely high ratings, all from the second season all the way through until its end. And it was just because the girls decided to not do it anymore, and they wanted to keep going. They were going to sign them even longer, and two of them said, "That's it, we're done." And obviously, the show was over from there. But this was a great show. Ran from 79 to 88. Had a good long run time, and being a spinoff too, and to have done something like that and to rival its show it spun off from with different strokes, I thought was pretty incredible. But great show, fun theme song for me, so it had to make my top 5.
Yeah, that's I think that's the whole grip right there. I do like that brunette up there. I remember her as an attractive gal at one point.
Great job,
Molly Ringwald. Yeah, I had a bunch of them. I didn't really, because I didn't know which cast you were going to hone in on. And what's odd about a lot of these shows, and no one talks about it, we only have these facts now, is that people get kicked off and just get cut from sitcoms left and right for a million different reasons. We've seen it in Fresh Prince. A lot of major characters that just for some reason didn't work out, or just there was something weird, something odd happened. And in the case of the Fresh Prince, there was some sort of battle between Aunt Viv and him. But yeah, there's a lot of weird stuff that can happen with a lot of these shows.
And in Facts of Life, actually, the character that played Blair at the end, towards the end of I think it was the very last season, second to last season, they wanted her to be the first character to get pregnant. And she refused because of her religious values and all. She said, absolutely not. I'm not going to do it. It was a big deal for them to. So
Lisa Whelchel.
Right, Lisa Whelchel. So she refused to do it. So there was a lot of that kind of stuff where I think once these actors and actresses get to a certain status, they all were begging to be a part of this at one point. And once you get to a certain status, you're empowered a bit more, I think, with all of these guys. And that's where it's kind of, these, you see some of they're making these power moves a little bit, I think. And at the end of the day, the network just wants to keep on getting people watching the show. But at some point, you're gonna have to give in one way or the other.
Girls. Yeah, there's my favorite character was Joe. For some reason, I had a crush. You know what? Not for some reason. There was an obvious reason.
She's gorgeous.
She was gorgeous, yes, but there was also the fact that she was an East Coast, Northeast Coast girl. That was something that was in my family, obviously, and it was something I recognized. So it was easier for me to relate to than this blonde girl that was just like, that shit was not in my family.
I just thought she was pretty. I could care less about her stupidness.
Blair was definitely pretty. And looking back on it, she was obviously beautiful. But yeah, man, the Facts of Life was definitely that it made the rotation, which is odd considering I think I was talking to my wife and she was saying a lot of guys, and it's definitely true, a lot of guys don't really watch female forward shows for the most part. It doesn't happen nowadays. Maybe it does happen more nowadays because there's really no just, I guess there's a few, but not as many as there were.
Blurred nowadays.
Yeah. Like back then, it was like dudes weren't talking about watching Facts of Life. You know what I mean? Like, or they had to. I guess they related more with what's his name that was on that show. God damn it! I wanted to say John Stamos, but I know that's not him.
No,
George Clooney. He was on that show.
I said Clooney.
There you go. Yeah, sorry. So that was it.
But
That was the
Clooney
only
didn't come in
character.
till the end, though. Clooney wasn't there till the last 2 seasons. So
I believe that might have been the only character I would have been like, okay, I can relate with that character. Other than that, yeah, the fact that Joe was a tomboy, as Sarah was just saying right here, yeah, a lot of women related to her. I think I know that. I know tomboy was, it's a phrase that I think should never have been a phrase, really. It makes you think male, female, but that really wasn't the case. It was just, sports forward people and women like Joe who didn't take shit even from Miss Garrett.
Well, you had, the mixture was good because you also had Natalie, who was like the athletic, and then you had Tootie, who was just hilarious and intelligent. So you had the group, that all did something. Natalie was on all the sports teams, did all these things. So everybody did something in this show that really made you feel like, these girls were active but different and had their own kind of little stories going. And that's what made the show really kind of fun to watch, I think, because you almost had you had little subplots within each show just to kind of seeing what each girl was dealing with.
Well, we're going to skip to the other side of the age spectrum and check out some of these girls.
Thank you for being a friend. Travel down the road and back again.
Yeah, buddy. And if I'm being honest, the presence of strong Italian characters in this show, strong female characters in this show, the fact that they were living in Miami, Florida, in this show, all these things resonated with me. I absolutely loved Sophia in this show. So we've got Sophia Petrillo, Rose Nyland, Dorothy Zbornak, and Blanche Devereaux are the characters. Now, I could have easily given you their first names, but there's no way in hell I remembered anybody other than Blanche's last name, which is crazy if I think about it. Like, it's just they became so memorable to me that I kind of forgot about really what their names were other than their first names. But it's about 4 older ladies who share a home in Miami, Florida. The Golden Girls received critical acclaim throughout most of its run and won several awards, including a Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Comedy Series twice. It also won 3 Golden Globes Awards for the Best Television Series, Musical or Comedy. Each of the 4 stars received an Emmy Award, making it one of only 4 sitcoms in the award's history to achieve this. Wow. It also ranked among the Nielsen ratings top 10 for 6 of its 7 seasons. I think it was number 54 on 60 best series of all time, 69 in the 101 best written series of all time. It's certainly the content that I was watching. It wasn't anything that I could relate to, but I think the fact that my mom could, and watching it with my mom and kind of laughing at the things she laughed with, made me understand maybe older Italian ladies more. God knows I didn't know, my mom was a strong Italian Catholic woman, and Aunt Sophia was definitely like that on this show. But I don't know, man. There was just something about it that it always made me laugh. There was, even when there was serious content, man, it was just something that was always being played, and I loved it. So that the Golden Girls made my number 4, man. Did you watch them a lot?
Oh, all the time. Love the show. The show is absolutely hilarious. And like you said, it was a very good point, because we were talking earlier about how all these shows are going to somehow get back to some sort of a message or make you think. But the way this show did it, there would not be a serious moment lasting very long at all. I mean, it would immediately go to something funny. Someone was going to say something to break that ice real quick, so that you didn't have that almost uncomfortable feeling watching a sitcom where you're like, okay, this is getting a little too serious, Right. And a lot of, like we were talking about before, these sitcoms are doing this at this time. But Golden Girls did a great job of just breaking that ice real quick, let you think, do your thing, but you're going to be laughing in a second for sure. And they had a lot of different ways to do that. Betty White's character, I mean, classic, incredible, hilarious. Estelle, as you said, too, certainly probably the funniest character on the show. And the mixture of everything, with Blanche being the slut, and the humor that they would put with that was hilarious and disturbing all at the same time. But yes, I loved it. This was a great show, and of course, they're the Florida Girls. I love them.
Yeah, it was beautiful stuff, man. And again, obviously the Miami, Florida thing was easy to relate to, although they didn't really go on location a lot of times. It was mostly in that
It could
freaking
have been
living room.
anywhere.
Yeah, they really could have been, and it was just sort of a vibe, and it was the fact that all apparently old Jewish and Italian women they go to Florida, Miami, Florida when they retire.
Exactly.
So
It
that's
fit
that
the
was the
stereotype.
that was the destination, Florida. But
No doubt.
there, that was it was another one of those shows from the memory banks, and it's really hard to to not include it, especially going back to the 70s when we weren't able to touch on all the 70s shows last week, but we did talk about Maude briefly, and this is obviously the same kind of character brought into the 80s, a strong, no nonsense woman who didn't take shit from men. Especially her husband in Maude, and it was easy for her to take that role and kind of run with it. But
And she did.
Yeah, that's my number 4. I love it, man. Are we ready for your number 3? Let's do it.
Now the world don't move to the beat of just one drum. What might be right for you may not be right for some. A man is born.
I was singing this song last night, and I had to be corrected by my wife, and I had the word wrong in one point, and I'm like, oh, well, and she told me what it was. I was like, yeah, that makes a lot more sense. So anyway,
tell me.
Well, you said a man is born. He's a man of means.
Right?
I thought it was needs, and I thought his needs was having to take care of these little kids. I don't know. That's what I went with. I've been singing needs forever. She's like, it's means. And I'm like, yeah, that makes so much more sense. So
because it rhymes with the next one, which is jeans.
Right. Because that one makes you think too. Because all they had were their jeans. Are they talking about the actual denim or the jeans within their body?
Whoa, man. Dude, this Illuminati penetrating all the 80s. But yeah, it was definitely the denim jeans.
I know.
And that's all they had.
So anyway, so it's always the theme songs with this stuff, man. So Mr. Drummond, as we all are affectionately know him as, Mr. Drummond comes and takes these beautiful kids who his housekeeper who passed away. These are his kids. And his promise to her was that he would take care of them. So these 2 young boys are being brought up in a Park Avenue, huge, beautiful millionaire home and going to this, school that's not where they would normally go if they were living with their mama. And everything goes crazy. This show was the first show. I know we keep talking about the messages and all that stuff. But for me, this was the first show where I was connected enough, and maybe because it was the age of the kids in the show and the stuff that was happening, that it made me feel more connected to the things that were happening to them. And, I didn't even really get the white-black concept, to be honest with you. So that, to me, at that age, for me, at least when I was growing up here in Miami, it didn't really whatever. So that was gone. It was just, this is a little boy trying to get used to living with some new guy after his mom died and with his brother, and that's all they have. And they're going, and so these were just problems, that they would have living in New York for me. And that next dynamic takes a whole different, puts a whole different thing on this show that really, really makes, I think, the first of all, the concept of the show is so great. But then again, the way they were able to play it out was incredible. The cast was wonderful. There's only one of them alive. You would never think it would be, crackhead Todd Bridges, but it is. And
so crazy, man.
that guy still made it through everything he did, served time, went to jail, did all of this stuff. He just lots of drugs, everything. And that guy is actually going from high school to talk to kids about staying away from drugs. So he's doing the right thing with the second half of his life. But it's incredible to know what a lot of these cast members had and what happened to them. It's pretty tragic, actually. But at the end of the day, the show that they made and the art that they did back then, the show ran from 78 to 86, was a great show. You got the Facts of Life spinoff on it. And I think this was another one of those shows that kind of, it kept with the beat of what was going on at the time. And it was something that it never really got stale. Certainly for me at that age. I'm sure now it wouldn't hold as well, but that show was perfect for me at that time. I think I learned the most, just little things in life of any TV show, probably from Different Strokes, more than anything else for me. What you talking about?
What I'm talking about is you're right. I remember how awesome it might have been to have been an orphan and be able to run up that staircase, dude, and live with Dana Plato without really any repercussions of anything.
Go look her
But
up
no,
too.
I-
If you want to see something crazy.
Yeah, they're for some reason I
He
believe
did
that might
another
have been.
movie called Different Strokes, a whole different meaning. So be careful to go look for that one, by the way.
Yes. She was her life after during this show, and then after this
Mhm.
show was just a monstrous spiral. Matter of fact, I believe she was in a game called Night Trap, which was one of the first virtual reality sort of games, a realistic game where it was sort of like you had to rescue her. It was just very Cinemax. But yeah, there's a lot of crazy stuff that came from this family, this cast. And so their housekeeper was Charlotte Ray from Facts of Life, right?
Mhm.
The same character, right?
Correct, same character. She was actually, that's what they were talking about in the show, is how she was going to be leaving the show because she was going to be taking care of these girls at this this school up in northern New York. And that's where Facts of Life spun from.
Yeah, I was a big fan of the show. Countless people came on. It seemed like it was like a launching board for a lot of actors at that time. And yeah, it made the rotation, man, of shows that I watched all the time. Is there one or two episodes I can think of? I don't think so. It's just sort of like the way it was with a lot of these 80s shows was that we got so comfortable with them. They were like our own family.
Yep.
So it didn't really matter so much what the content was. It was the fact that we got to watch them when we got to watch them. That's why they ran for so long, man. They became part of American culture and definitely the folks on Different Strokes.
That's true. At this show, and Philip Drummond was the only one who appeared on every episode. The only one.
Wow.
There a different actor at some point or another missed parts of these seasons. Dana Plato missed 2 seasons because she was pregnant and then came back for the last 2. So, and I believe she went to college or something, so you didn't see her. But there was they'd always try to find a way to write things around what was going on with with these particular actors and actresses.
Ooh, yeah. Like I said, the child actor thing is definitely an issue for some kids. I believe maybe more so back in the 70s and 80s before they were in the spotlight, and some of the shit that happened to these kids and young actors were a lot more quiet. But nonetheless, the show, it definitely tackled a lot of positive issues, negative issues, obviously, but handled them all in a very positive manner. There was really nothing creepy about Mr. Drummond, although it can be put in a creepy light. There really wasn't. It was a great show, man, and it was a really, really important show when the 70s, which was so pro-black and black dominated the awesome shows of the 70s, they sort of disappeared in the 80s. The 80s really became more about white families or white mixed families. For some reason, families that, like in this instance, maybe took in a black family member, or it just wasn't. It was a little bit more of a splash of white amongst the sea of African American shows, but it taught me a lot of things, man. It definitely bred tolerance, I think, for a lot of other people as well. You had to kind of deal with it on a weekly basis. It wasn't the only show that was tackling that, so.
Right.
Different Strokes is one of the best, man.
Absolutely.
So let's get to number 3 on my list. Yeah, nice bluesy stuff. We've got Dan Connor, Roseanne Connor, Jackie Harris, DJ Connor, Darlene Connor, and Becky Connor. The series centered around who? The Connors, an American working class family struggling to get by on a limited household income in their home at 714 Delaware Street in the drab, fictional mid-state exurb of Lanford, Illinois. Although initially nominally located in Fulton County, several hours away from Chicago, references as over the years suggested the town is in Aurora, when in fact I believe it was in Elgin. And that's pretty much all they're giving me on that one. But I remember more than anything, more than what they were tackling, I remember Roseanne. And Roseanne was such a positive character in my life. And again, she went on to be something negative in some people's eyes from for some things that she said, and other than grabbing her crotch and spitting after the I believe that was the national anthem at a baseball game. She was crass, but she was also awesome. Her stand-up was great, man. The way that she was just, everyone was, the women in comedy back then were very submissive, and she was the opposite of that. Just basically saying fuck you, and she used the F word like it was a sword, and it was wonderfully wielded. And this show was no different, man. Just between the stuff that they got into, and I never really understood how Dan dealt with her, if I'm being honest, but the family, the girls, the kids element brought into it all, and they were really one of the families that tackled serious shit. And even in the new run of Roseanne, before she got kicked off of her own show, they were tackling some pretty tough stuff, man. So the whole basis of Roseanne was no bullshit, realistic. How do you survive on such a small income during this particular time in life? And it was super relatable.
Not to me, not in the least. I never watched this show, never once. Never once. I think maybe it was on for a little bit because it was on a lot, but
it was on for a little bit, man.
I didn't like this show. Roseanne. I like Roseanne about as much as I like ice cream. Like for a little bit it's really good, but then it's going to start to turn on you. So I feel that lady, like, yeah, right, like you said, her stand up was really great. The in-your-face stuff, you're hearing, a female cursing and just, sitting up there with a posture like a dude and saying whatever she wants and talking back to you, and you'd be afraid to say something to her because she's going to lay you out. That was cool for like 5 minutes. And then it's like, then it's the same freaking act, and it grows old and it's tired, and I'm just done with it. It's like, that's obnoxious now. You've gone to obnoxious now. So Roseanne was just not a character I liked. So there's no way I was really going to get into the show too much, so I can't really even speak to it at all. I know nothing of the show. I never watched a full episode all the way through. So I could tell you nothing about Roseanne at all, other than I don't like Roseanne.
Not a lot of people did. That was kind of the reason why she got popular. It was the reason why Dice got popular. There was a reason why that kind of person in the 80s got popular. It was used for them in publicity, crass. And she was super grating. I understand that. And I know people, she was definitely love or hate. I know that there weren't a few people that were like, oh, I kind of dug Roseanne. Like, no. You couldn't hear her talk any more than Fran Drescher's character. Like there was just some things that were done on purpose, and she definitely pushed that character. Just as Larry the Cable Guy doesn't talk like that, but that character is what you will be remembering for the rest of your life. Right. She did a great job honing that attitude, and you're right. That. She was awesome in that way where people couldn't stand her, but
if that's what she set out to do, she's done a great job. Today.
Yeah.
I mean, she's the same chick. She's not changed.
She's enough to drive you to drink.
Ah, yes.
Let's think about that.
That's a good one. I like this.
The world today takes everything you've got. Taking a break from all your worries sure would help a lot.
How is this not number one? How is Cheers not number one? Like, seriously, this is like the greatest show to have ever been put on television, ever. But it's my number two. And it's only because my number one just barely edged it out. But God, did I love Cheers. 117 Emmy nominations with 28 Emmys. I mean, this is the king. This is just the king right here. The incredible mixture of, now this takes something away from what we were talking about all the other sitcoms before, and you're going to get a message and you're going to think, well, yeah, but in a different way. Here we have working class versus kind of upper class, and you have this mixture in a bar in such a great way, the way it's set up. Sam, Norm, Carla, all working class type of people, with Diane, Frasier, Lilith, all more of that upper class intermingling and really getting to see the outside world never, and just what it is when these people are in a bar. And when it is when they're just talking about just life and basic stuff that you're going to deal with every day. This was incredible humor because of the cast of characters. And this show took on so many different iterations in the beginning to where it was dead last. Actually, 74 of 77 shows that were rated in the season one, 74 of 77 is where Cheers placed. It bombed. It was terrible. And it took a mixing up of the characters, a little bit more of the storyline. It was supposed to be set in a hotel in California, and so it turned into a lot of different things until they ultimately settled on the bar. And in the way that they did this, and again, the cast of characters made it great. Another show that had its issues with characters and had characters coming in and out, whether they were able to play them in or out, they kind of took, depending on the situation. Coach, for instance. I mean, when I first started watching the show, obviously Coach was in there the first few years, I believe 4 seasons. Coach was there. This show ran from 82 to 93, 11 seasons. So Coach was only there the first 4 seasons. Hilarious bartender, older gentleman with just kind of had the, silliness of dementia sort of to him. And, but he would always solve your problems. At the end of the day, Coach always had the greatest thing at the end of the day to say, where everyone would be like, well, that just came from that guy. The incredible character. Shame he had a heart attack. He passed. They actually on the set, he had a couple of episodes going, not episodes, but actual health episodes on the set that scared the cast. They talk about it a lot after the fact. They were really, really worried about him. And ultimately he had to step away for health reasons and did die of a heart attack, which was sad and tragic for the show. They basically didn't write it into the show too much. They just came in the next season because they had already filmed, because of the writer's strike, enough of that season and the finale with him in it already that they were able to get through the season. So they kind of just said he was away on a couple of the other episodes that they hadn't filmed yet. So they worked that out. But then once they got to the end of it and broke into season 5, I believe it was, they came back with having, said that Coach had passed. And that's when they brought Woody Harrelson in, who was just another absolutely incredible character into Cheers. And another good mixture, again, of that dynamic of working class to upper class, because Woody's fiance is her family a millionaire. So here's this guy who's got like nothing, and he's about to marry into like millions and millions of dollars, And this is just all a part of the dynamic that continues to play out in this show, and that it ultimately, of course, with its spin-off into Frasier and taking that a new dynamic now, going to a more upper class and what he was doing and the way he was played out. He was supposed to be John Lithgow originally, so that actually got changed pretty quickly, which is funny because those two actors sometimes mess up in my head. But Lithgow was actually supposed to.
I could see that.
It's kind of weird, but ultimately I think they got it right. I mean, this was great. I mean, absolutely incredible cast once again. Frasier turned out to be a great show as well. The dynamic between Sam and Diane, I mean, ultimately it was like a storybook thing, truthfully, that would play out in tabloids. People would be talking about what's going on with Sam and Diane and the way that they were able to work that dynamic. It was such a big deal of what was going to happen with when were they finally going to do this, and that really built up a lot in all the episodes. But they were able to do that romantic thing with so much humor throughout the show that you never really felt like it was that mushiness of anything at all. It never felt that way. It was hilarious, the rejections that she would give him and just everything that would happen. And then it even got a little bit too tight. Carla was going to stick her head in there and say something ridiculous. So there was always something funny going on in that show. Every episode, Norm, absolutely that's classic. People who yell Norm in any bar walking in, it doesn't even matter anymore. This was a great show. This was written incredibly. 28 Emmys is going to tell you a lot of that, and cast perfectly. The dynamic never died in this show. It ran through 93, and it could have kept going, except for that it was just not as fresh anymore. And the writers themselves knew that this show needed to end, and their finale is still one of the highest rated shows ever watched. Some magazines have rated it as the best finale ever. A lot of little tidbits in that. The little picture he fixes on the wall when he walks out. That picture was of Geronimo, and it hung in the actor that played Coach's dressing room. So it was one last little nod to Coach right at the end when he just adjusts that picture, which is the last thing he does before he walks out. Walks into the pool room. The first time you see Sam, he walks out of the pool room. It ends with him walking into the pool room. It's just one of these kind of little tidbits here and there that they throw into the show that makes it an incredible show. The people enthusiasts to this show know all these crazy things about Cheers, and there's a ton to learn just in researching it recently. And another show that keeps the time. I mean, you can watch it. It's timeless. You can watch it today. It's a funny show, and you should.
Yeah, I was. I wouldn't say I was a fan of it. I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it. It didn't. It was a show that if it was on, I probably would watch it, and it really had a lot to do with Norm. And I didn't. Woody's character was definitely something I thought was funny, and I don't know. There for some reason, I guess maybe I didn't like Shelley Long. That was who played her, right? Am I right on that one?
Yeah,
I didn't love her to
Long,
death.
yeah.
Didn't love her to death. But Danson, dude, you know what I mean? Like it's so
great.
weird because he's in everything great and he's great in everything. But it just wasn't one of those shows that I watched a hell of a lot. But I'm very aware of it. I liked the concept of the bar and how different people from all walks of life would walk in there because it is a bar, and it was all based on how they react with each other. I definitely understand why people like it. I didn't watch it enough to say I liked it.
The other cool aspect to it is that Sam was a recovering alcoholic. He was a Boston Red Sox pitcher, and he was kind of washed up and out of the league. He was an alcoholic because of that, and he bought a bar in his alcoholic days, and then he got clean. So Sam never drank. In any episode you ever watch, Sam never drinks because he is a recovering alcoholic. He doesn't drink throughout the entire show. They don't push that envelope, but there's a lot of shows that do deal with alcohol, a lot of episodes that obviously deal with alcohol, but alcoholism and just kind of showing a little bit about that and the way that Sam handled himself from episode to episode, and still trying to be a part of buying the bar back after it got sold, which was kind of part of the plot line through the show, through 11 seasons.
Well, I'll tell you what, I just didn't see it a whole hell of a lot, so it didn't fall in my lap as it is one of the greatest shows. I know that of the 80s, definitely, just not on my list. I didn't see it a lot, but I did see this a lot. So a lot of these shows, obviously, I said at the top of the show that, Kenny took a lot of the great shows and put them on his freaking list. This is not, none of these that I have on here are a replacement show, but I had to go back and think, what have I seen a lot of? And in some cases, can I relate to them? Sure. Do I like the stories? Do I like the characters? There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of reasons why we like the show. The main reason why I love Mama's Family is because it gave me the ability to continuously love Carol Burnett and Vicki Lawrence and all the stuff that they did that was so important for me in the 70s, man. Let me tell you, man, a lot of the things that my friends and my family would say that I have comedic timing or are funny have everything to do with Carol Burnett. Carol Burnett made it really, really acceptable to be extremely weird and outlandish with comedy and outside of the box thinking. And Mama's Family came from a skit called The Family that was from the Carol Burnett show, and became syndicated and all that good stuff. But it was an amazing show for me. It was on all the time in my house. My mom loved it. We have Thelma Harper that was played by Vicki Lawrence, Eunice Harper, Vicki Lawrence's daughter, Carol Burnett at that time, Vinton Harper, Naomi Harper, and Ed Higgins, who was Harvey Korman from Carol Burnett's show. And I believe actually there's a couple of characters. The reason why I love the show, obviously, because you could find characters from the Carol Burnett show on this show from time to time, and it was a wonderful extension of that show in the 80s. Completely different. Vicki Lawrence's character was just constantly angry and pissed off at her daughter all the time, and it was hilarious. Just the way that they treated each other was it was something I understood. And they were very snippy with each other, and like I say, it was something I could relate to in that manner because it was just always constant bickering and not liking of a specific family member or even an in-law or anything like that. But it had to make it on my list, and it had to be up there high. Do I remember a buttload of the episodes? I don't, but I do love Mama's Family, and I love the characters and where they came from.
I like this show. It was funny. It just isn't a show. Honestly, like you said, I couldn't remember anything as far as a particular episode. I'm not even sure if I've watched one from beginning to end. But I do know that when I flipped around and Mama's Family was on, if I left it there for a while, I was laughing. It was funny. It was a funny show. But I really can't speak to it a lot either because I don't know the characters. I'm not totally familiar with the background until you said what you just said, which is pretty interesting. But No, I had no idea about Mama's Family. I have no idea where I came from. I didn't know anybody that was involved. All of a sudden, here's this show. It's kind of funny. And it made your top 5.
It did. It made it for a lot of reasons. I'm trying
Number
to find
2
the.
even. My God, way up there.
Yeah, I've seen so many of them, and again, they probably blur together. But let's see. All right. So according to Vicki Lawrence's autobiography, Vicki: The True Life Adventures of Miss Fireball, Carol Burnett resented Vicki Lawrence for accepting the role of Mama for first-run syndication with producer Joe Hamilton. It was during this time that Burnett was involved in an acrimonious divorce from Hamilton, who both produced The Carol Burnett Show and Mama's Family. Burnett felt Lawrence had been disloyal to her and held a grudge against her until Hamilton's death in 1991.
Wow.
By the time of Hamilton's death, Burnett and Lawrence had reconciled. So
she stole the role from Carol.
It wasn't a steal. It was something that was going to happen anyway. But yeah, I believe it. Right. He was the manager and had the rights to that character because he had the right. Yeah. And I didn't know that until today, man. And she was on there. And I also believe if you go back and look at some of the fights that they had on the show, the way they were yelling at each other, it almost seemed too real. And I really think that some of the angst that they had for each other in specific times were fueling a lot of those, for sure. Nice. 100%, man. But yeah, I love it. It was all over the place. We're getting to the number ones, right? This is your number one, right?
This is my number 1. Let's go.
Bring it. Wait. Bring it.
No. Oh my God. Okay.
So soothing. The illustration drawing them.
I tell you, this is it. This is the one that beat Cheers for me. Family Ties ran from 82 to 89, like just right in that sweet spot for me for TV. And I was immediately drawn to this family. My parents were hippies. These parents were hippies. Alex P. Keaton was not a hippie. So those of you who don't know the show, Michael J. Fox plays Alex P. Keaton. Always has to have that moniker. And with Alex P. Keaton comes a young Republican conservative growing up with 2 60s hippie parents. And that dynamic right there, I loved. I fell in love with it. I didn't necessarily understand a lot of the political side of it all, obviously, at that age, but I got it that dynamic played out within their family, that this guy was like rejecting the family and the hippiness and was going in a totally different way. And it's a great time for this in the 80s, again, because you've got the 60s and the baby boomers, and now they're having kids, and these kids are all of a sudden intelligent and they're paying attention, and they're rejecting the freedoms of but they're rejecting the kind of free living 60s vibe and understanding that, hey, we want to go to work and we want to make money and there's nothing wrong with that. And there isn't, but that was what was happening in the Reagan era. And this was a great kind of illustration of a family that was dealing with a very intelligent young man that was kind of impressing himself onto the other family members. His sister Mallory, a year or 2 younger, definitely not as bright, and just more into materialistic stuff and fashion and everything like that. She didn't really care about all the other stuff. So, which wasn't really the 60s thing either. So she was kind of rejecting, her mother's 60s feminist kind of vibe as well. So both these kids are doing that. Tina Yothers winds up playing the youngest Jennifer, and the youngest daughter, and she was just kind of follows in her parents' ways, just wants to be a kid, enjoy life. And the dynamic of these kids was incredible. They brought the little kid in at the last couple of seasons, but whatever. Prior to that, the major seasons of this show was that group of 4, and that family, truthfully, was just, of 5. And that family resembled a lot of what our family was, because we were a family of 5 as well. And I just felt like I related a lot to Alex B. Keaton. I'm sorry to my brother, who has to be Tina Yothers, but still, it's just the way it worked out. Sarah will be good with being Mallory, I'm sure. She was cool.
Mallory.
Justine Bateman, come on, it's like a good cast. And obviously, Michael J. Fox just won award after award after award. He actually did what John Larroquette did from Night Court and said to the Emmys that, hey, we don't want anymore. Don't want anymore. We don't even want to be nominated again, because they were just taking it year after year after year after year. So
wow.
That was cool. That's probably a cool thing to do, at that time.
Sure.
And but the show's dynamic meant everything, and this group was perfect. And I think that, again, it played so much to me. This was the very first series that went off the air, and I cried when it did on the final episode. Literally cried the last time. When they announced it was a big thing, their final episode, this one made me cry. I'd since cried on other shows ending, but this was the first. So Family Ties, never miss an episode. Watch it from beginning to end, right in the sweet spot for me from 82 to 89. It won, all those Emmys that were won were all Michael J. Fox's, but the show was great. The theme song was great, sung by Johnny Mathis and Denise Williams. I mean, it's a great jam, and it just another one of those things that just kind of got you going on that must-watch TV on NBC. This was another one of those shows that was on that as well.
I love me some Mallory for sure. I do like kind of how APK was always kind of stick it to his father and definitely going against the hippiness of mom and dad. And,
right.
I do remember his shtick of where he could always count the coins, a total of coins by hearing them drop on a table. He could tell you what the denomination of coins were. I remember that being one of his weird freaking things. But more than anything, I remember this episode. I don't know why it is. Actually bullshit. I know exactly why it is, because for some reason alcoholics could get hammered off of vanilla extract. And I remember Tom Hanks being, I think maybe the father's brother or somebody in the family. I think it was an uncle, but he was an alcoholic, and he had this big scene where he just caused a big massive scene, and he was trying to pound a bunch of vanilla extract to get drunk. And that's how they tackled alcoholism in the 80s, ladies and gentlemen. But yeah, that was yeah, he was pounding the vanilla extract. Vanilla, I imagine, is what they called it. But yeah, that was an odd thing. I remember that episode very well, but I also remember the crazy dynamic between the family. It was a great show. It hit a lot of stuff. Obviously, Michael J. Fox was the backbone of it, and that's the reason why it was as successful as it was. But
absolutely, and the writers knew that, and as they started it, I don't think they knew that, but they picked up on that real quickly in the early seasons, and everything got written basically for Alex P. Keaton. That was the character. I would call him that, and he'd be in Teen Wolf, and I'd be like, hey, it's Alex P. I just love that show.
Yeah, it's a great show. Good pick, man. And we're gonna spin off and play a little bit of 6 Degrees of Bateman for this one, because it's connected in Bateman form for my number one.
We are face to face, a couple of silver spoons, hoping to find we're two of a kind.
Yeah,
together
we're gonna find our we. Yeah, man. There wasn't a lot about this show that I could relate to, other than the fact that I wanted to be Ricky Schroeder's best friend, Ricky Stratton's best friend. We have on the cast Ricky Stratton, the son, obviously, Edward Stratton the third, the father, Kate Summers Stratton, the mom, Alfonso Spears, who was played by our friend Alfonso Ribeiro, and Derek Taylor, who is Jason Bateman, who's, I think, there from seasons 1 to 2, and Alfonso took 3 to 5 because I believe Bateman was going to the Hogan family. He just resonated so well on screen, apparently. But Silver Spoons was a badass show, man. Obviously, the part of having a millionaire father and an absolute drop-dead gorgeous stepmother was not something I could relate to in any single way. But I do think one of the most endearing characteristics of Derek, who is played by Jason Bateman on this show, was the fact that he consistently assaulted Ricky's stepmother, with always hitting on her at any cost. In some scenes I watched, he was just looking directly at her breasts while he was talking to her. It was blatant. And that might be one of the reasons why I loved his character. I don't know. I don't. Jason Bateman to this day is absolutely one of the funniest characters, one of the greatest actors in Hollywood, and one of the best comedic actors. But we've got Alfonso right here hanging out, who taught a lot of us how to breakdance with his VHS tape. I already knew. But this show is just one of my favorites, man. And it had a lot to do with wanting to live this family. And even though Ricky Stratton had a lot of shit. He didn't always act like it. He did get into a lot of trouble, but every kid did at that age. But he didn't seem like an ass. He just sort of seemed to really kind of enjoy what he had, which was the ability to ride a train in his house. So yeah, I loved Silver Spoons. I loved the
Didn't you have like a real train that drove through the back of your house though? So it's kind of the same thing.
Maybe. Yeah, it was one of those shows that stuck with me as number one because I don't know, maybe I wanted to be Ricky Stratton, but I definitely wanted to be his friend Derek, who was able to go in there and hit on his mom all the time, or his stepmom. I have to remember that. But yeah, I loved it, man. What about you, man?
So this was a show I definitely watched a lot as well. I was super surprised when I saw it on as number one for you. I got to say that. To me, I don't know if it would have made my list, but it was definitely a show I watched all the time. It was, again, that time slot. It was right there where kind of everything was on. So they kind of funneled everything to you then. But I didn't mind watching this show at all. I liked it. It was fun. It was cool as far as watching a rich kid and ride on train in his house and all that cool stuff. That was pretty neat. But I think the overall premise of the show got kind of stale for me. So it was just kind of neat for a little while, but overall I don't think I really would have said I'd have it in my top 10. I don't know. I got 6 or 7, man. That should have been pushed up here, man. We should have talked about this first. But all right, man. Silver Spoons it is, brother.
Yeah, those are our tops, and we can't get out of here. We're running a little bit late here, but that's all right. I'm gonna run through the list of the shows we didn't talk about, and if anybody has any shows that they like that I don't talk about right now, real quick, throw them in the comments section. Yeah, for sure. So we have we talked about that. Barney Miller actually is considered an '80s show as well.
Yeah,
there's a few
it did run into.
There's a few that bled
there. Yeah,
but if we talked about it, we're not going to talk about it again. But in the 80s, we had the Tracy Ullman Show. Mm-hmm. Come on. That spawned, obviously, The Simpsons and things like that.
It only ran for like 3 seasons, though. I mean, Tracy Ullman ran 3, maybe 4 seasons. It was actually very short-lived. Mork and Mindy. Dude. How did we not talk about Mork and Mindy, man? That absolutely should have made this.
We had
Silver Spoons? Really? Silver Spoon? No, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Continue.
We had 227.
Oh, man. Yeah, see? Give me a break.
I grew up with Marla Gibbs, man. Punky Brewster. We didn't talk about Punky. Oh, Punky. And then we had, I'll run through these fast. Give Me a Break.
Give Me a Break was great. Mel Carter was awesome.
Give Me a Break. Too Close for Comfort. Family Matters. Bosom Buddies. Charles in Charge. Mr. Belvedere. Head of the Class. Benson. Saved by the Bell. Perfect Strangers. Alf. Designing Women. Who's the Boss? Growing Pains, Wonder Years, Small Wonder, and Square Pegs.
Wow. Did you even mention Murphy Brown, Who's the Boss, Benson?
No. I did. I think I did say Who's the Boss, but okay. Benson might not have been on that list. And there was a kind of a fine line that I drew where if it was in any way dramatic,
Benson wasn't dramatic.
No.
Wonder Years is dramatic, though.
There could have been a few, and again, I think
we got to do this again.
Yeah, we might come back next week and talk about the overall show of the 1980s, other than just specifically the ones that we talked about tonight. So we can dive into some other things, Magnum PI, things like that.
Hazard, Chips,
yeah. Shows that were not necessarily comedic all the time. They were dramatic and had comedic elements. So I think we might do that next week. But regardless, ladies and gentlemen, thank all of you for coming and hanging out with us tonight at the Casually Serious Podcast. These are the top 5 80s sitcoms, according to Bob and KenMan. If you agree with it, let us know. If you disagree with it, let us know. Thank you so much, everyone that came to hang out tonight. Todd Morris, Sarah Berryhill, Jordana, Brian Smith, thank you for coming and hanging out all the time. Andrew Silver, who else came back in there? Cowboys legend. Thanks for coming and dropping in, man. I appreciate it. We had a good handful of folks coming in today, guys. Thank you so much for hanging out with us.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, for real. KenMan, anything you want to say before we get the hell out of here?
Just want to thank everybody. We try to keep this thing right around an hour, so we're right here now. So I won't talk y'all's ears off anymore. Just happy that you guys joined us tonight, and hope to see you guys next week on 420.
Oh yeah. So
we got a little more to talk about. Taco Tuesday, 420. There's a lot to talk about. More 80s shows. Come on, next week's going to be great.
Yeah, we are. If you like cannabis, come and hang out with us next week, ladies and gentlemen.
Even if you don't, come and hang out with us.
Thanks for hanging out with us tonight, folks. And, come and visit us next week for 420. Thanks so much for chilling. Subscribe on YouTube if you haven't done so.
Yes, please do that.
I didn't mean to point at you.
That's important.